Alright guys, Jameson and Alex here. Today we're going to be doing a subclass video for the Pyromancer Sorcerer.
Yes.
Which is, they had a special release of a Kaladesh Magic the Gathering D&D crossover, unofficial, but it was written by Wizards. It's one of those like gray area things. Just as a crossover kind of thing, I guess they do it.
Sure.
They used to do it back in the day, so we found this, and it's kind of a variant to the Storm Sorcerer, so we thought we'd cover it. But yeah, if you're new to the channel or to the subclass series, what we're going to do is go through all the abilities gained in this subclass, and we're going to rate it based on its roleplay value, combat value, and overall class synergy, based on how the abilities gained in this subclass improve on the base class abilities.
Right.
So, we also have a giveaway going on for the
free
D&D Beyond Players Bundle, so make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to be entered in that as well. But without any further ado, Alex, what do we get with this subclass?
Cool. Remember, Sorcerers, level 1, level 6, 14, and 18. So, keep that in mind. Starting off level 1, you have Heart of Fire at first level. Whenever you cast a spell that is of a first level or higher, no cantrips, and they deal fire damage, so very specific, fire magic erupts from you, not where the spell goes, from you. This eruption causes creatures of your choice that you can see within 10 feet of you to take fire damage equal to half of your sorcerer level. That is a passive thing that is all the time. There's no use, number of times per rest or whatever. It is all the time, anytime first level spell or higher, fire damage around you for free.
Yes, it's kind of similar to the Storm Sorcerer. I think it's level 6 that they get something with lightning or thunder damage. So it's kind of in that vein, but fire is a little bit more potent, I would say.
Sure.
Generally.
Yeah.
With those kind of spells.
Also at 6, we have Fire in the Veins. You gain resistance to fire damage, and to me, more importantly, your spells that do fire damage ignore resistance to said fire damage. And there's a ton of stuff that resists fire damage. So just allowing you to cast fire damage on them normally, it's very good. Because as a sorcerer, you actually have access to a fire damage spell at all 9 levels of spell casting. So
you do,
and on top of cantrip, obviously. So that is very nice. You don't have to worry about having to pick and choose different spells to get around resistances throughout the campaign. You can just take fire damage all the time.
Exactly. And if you're playing, as a side note here, if you're playing with the optional sorcerer class features from Tasha's, where you can transmute spells and change the damage type, even better, because then you just change it to fire.
Yeah, Cone of Cold becomes Cone of Fire.
Then at level 14, we have Pyromancer's Fury. When you're hit by a melee attack, you can use your reaction to deal fire damage to the attacker. Damage equals your sorcerer level, and it also ignores resistance to fire damage. So it's, again, like the Storm Sorcerer, it's fire damage, and it overcomes the resistances, which I think is actually more important than it sounds.
Sure.
Because then it lets you focus, again, on that type of damage and be more effective with it.
You don't have to worry about the problems of focusing on a one damage type like normal.
Exactly.
Right.
And then lastly, level 18, we have Fiery Soul. You gain immunity to fire damage, which is probably the most common damage type.
Outside of DPS, yeah, I would say so.
Right, exactly. In addition, any spell or effect you create ignores resistance to fire damage and treats immunity to fire damage as resistance, so it kind of gets knocked down a step.
Yes,
so
love that.
If you were still thinking, I'm still worried about people being immune to fire damage, well,
so?
Now they're just resistant. So
it is level 18, but it's there. It's there.
And also, I think it's important to realize a lot of things are resistant to fire damage, but not a ton of things are immune.
This is true.
Right? So it's not going to be as big a deal as it really sounds.
Yep.
But the immunity to fire damage is pretty big because a lot of things deal fire damage.
Yes.
So that is pretty nice just to get a freebie on there on the defensive side of things.
You like bring on every red dragon that ever exists. I don't care.
As long as you stay away from them, you don't really have to worry too much about that breath.
But you're a sorcerer, so you don't want to get remotely close to them anyway.
And the breath is really the scary thing about those dragons anyway.
Yep.
So yeah, those are the abilities gained in the subclass. Very simple, very straightforward. Fire, Pyromancer.
Fire hot.
Makes sense. So first up, we're going to rate the roleplay value. Asterisk, as always.
Yes. Talking
about roleplay value, we're talking about interacting with the world around you, interacting with NPCs, non-combat scenarios, avoiding combat, basically things outside of the initiative order.
Right.
Not talking about class fantasy, history, lore, background that's on you as a player. Can't rate that, but we can rate the abilities gained in the subclass and how they might improve your potential in those role play scenarios. That whole segment, for me saying that, is going to take much longer than it is to score this because, as you noticed, there are absolutely no RP things, in, as we mentioned, according to our criteria for RP.
Literally nothing.
It's all dealing with fire damage and casting spells that deal fire damage.
And not taking fire damage.
Right. So As opposed to the Storm Sorcerer, which gives you like flying speed
Yep.
and some utility with wind direction
and weather
some
and
storm
things.
stuff.
Yep.
There's none of that in the fire side, so we gave it an 1 out of 5.
Because there's literally nothing there.
Literally nothing to work with on that. So
I thought about scoring it a half. I thought about it. Just because it's literally nothing.
get it down to 0. But yeah, nothing really on the RP side at all.
On the combat side of things, again, if it's that just abysmal on one side, it's got to have something on the other, and it does. Good Lord, otherwise we're back to Battle Ranger Barbarian again, which we don't want that. Again, all 4 abilities are strictly geared toward combat. I do wish the Heart of Fire ability was the destination of your spell exploded for fire damage instead of yourself, because you're a sorcerer and you're scared of being remotely close to anything that doesn't like you because you'll die immediately because you don't have any health.
Yeah.
But it does, it does make things that they say, oh, I stood too close to him, he hurt me, and he didn't even touch me. Because, so maybe you could nudge things away from you that way, just from the extra damage. It would help kind of delete stuff around you quicker. Because you go like, Burning Hands or something right there, like a cone in front of you, and this hits.
Dragons.
So it does like help you create some burst around you to kill things that are too close to you.
Which, at early levels, too, that does make Burning Hands and things like Dragon's Breath that much better than they already are.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, for anybody up in your kitchen that shouldn't be. Of course, resistance to fire damage, and of course, later immunity to fire damage is great because it just helps you ignore the most common elemental damage type in the game. That's along with poison, but I think fire is the most common. I will just give the little caveat. Maybe poison's close. Also, the fact that your spells are overcoming resistance and later making immunity to fire damage resistance is huge, because as a sorcerer, your biggest weakness outside of your lack of health is the number of spells known.
Right.
Even once you hit 20, if you do not multi-class and you go all the way through 20 levels of sorcerer, you're only going to know 15 spells.
Yeah.
So, if you take a fire damage spell at every level, which you can, thankfully, as a sorcerer, that gives you 9. So you now only have 6 other spells to play with,
And there's some that you pretty much have to have.
Like, Shield is almost a guarantee. Absorb Elements is really hard to pass up on if you have any casters in your campaign at all. Then your stuff like either maybe Fly, because this doesn't give it to you, and a lot of things have ways to get it. Potentially Haste, things like that. Maybe you want to CC like a Hold Person, something like that.
Right.
So,
Misty Step to get away.
Misty Step to get out of trouble. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the Pyromancer's Fury does kind of pair well with the first ability. If a melee attacker does hit you, they're all just going to flat out just take fire damage back to the face.
Yep.
And again, the good thing about all the abilities here is it doesn't cost you anything.
Right.
That's probably the one thing I really do like about the subclass, is that everything's built in. It's all passive stuff. It just triggers based on what you do, and there's no, use for this, use for this, use for this. It just happens all the time. However, you are kind of pigeonholed into you only do fire damage, do fire damage, and you must do fire damage. Otherwise, you're bad, because everything is just buffing your ability to do better at fire damage. Score-wise, we went with a 3.5 out of a possible 5, primarily because, for me, it's the 2 of your 4 abilities, while they are helpful, are counterintuitive to how you would play your sorcerer normally, of like, oh, you have no health and no armor, don't get remotely close to anything. So this is like, well, if something that does get on you, it does help that, which is good. At the same time, I would rather have, like I said, that spell damage happen away from me.
Yeah, that would be nice.
And have ways to get away from stuff and to keep things away from me instead of hurting them if they hurt me. kind of thing. Right.
And that's where I think if you really can utilize Misty Step well, that'll be beneficial to you. But then if you're using Misty Step, you're only really able to do Firebolt. So it's going to have big limitations on what you can actually do with that. So that brings us lastly to the overall class synergy.
Indeed.
And looking with the sorcerers, the main things they have to work with are going to be their sorcery points, obviously.
Yeah.
Most of which the best options are going to be your Quicken Spell is a very good option to burst out something, especially with this can be interesting because you're going to get that Firebolt on there. Cool.
Sure.
Avoiding that fire damage resistance. And also you could bonus action another Fireball or something to do even more damage.
You can.
So that is nice. Though you can do that with any other sorcerer as well. So that is a nice option. But then also getting your other meta options, like Subtle Spell is always pretty solid. considering, you can't be counterspelled when
Yeah.
no one has any indication that you're casting a spell.
Yep.
Twin spell becomes pretty solid as well, because if you're looking at something that maybe does have fire resistance doesn't matter.
Yep.
Now it doesn't if
Yeah.
you're at the designated
Once you hit level
time.
6 anyway, yeah.
So you can twin spell onto stuff. And then, of course, heightened spell
Sure.
is pretty solid, too, being able to give disadvantage for something
Yep.
like an immolation,
Yes.
where they have to get that immediate 8d6, and then they have that they're going to fail. Well, disadvantage, they're probably going to fail.
Dang it, they better.
And then giving them the chance to get that extra 46 for at least one round,
Right.
which can be pretty solid
Yes.
as well. But yeah, that's a pretty good twin spell target right there, I guess, too, actually.
It is.
So yeah, that's nice on there.
Bearing the lead there a little bit. I was like, I thought we were going to do emulation for the twin spell.
But yeah, so definitely interesting. But I think my biggest issue with this is it does kind of, like Alex said, pigeonhole you a little bit into the
Yes.
fire spells, which, I mean, it's called Pyromancer. What do you expect, right? But even with that, you'd like to see a little bit more variation.
Yep.
It's not doing a whole lot for you other than the overcoming resistances.
Yes.
It's not really detracting much. It's giving you
No.
some options when you get in close range, which
Yeah.
you kind of want to have some extra bonuses.
Yes.
Because it's going to happen eventually.
Yes.
Just that's how it is. You're going to get attacked, you're dealing lots of damage, and you're squishy. So guess what? Who's going to try to get killed first?
Yeah, especially if you're fighting things that are intelligent.
Right. So we just gave it a flat 3 out of 5.
Yep.
It's relatively balanced, nothing too crazy, nothing really detracting too much
Yep.
on there. And the immunity, I think, to fire damage is a big deal, and the resistance to fire damage, because it is
It definitely helps your
one of the
survivability.
most
Yeah,
common
for sure.
damage types.
Yep.
But yeah, that's it, guys. Pretty short, pretty simple.
When the abilities all fit into like one screen on my phone like this,
That's like a sword, coast,
yeah,
clip, clash.
it doesn't take a bunch of time to read through everything.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it, guys. If you want to see more of this stuff, I think there were some variations in some of the other MTG 5e crossover stuff.
Sure.
A lot of them were kind of like this, where it's like a variation of some existing subclasses. If you want to see those, let us know down below. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, when our new videos are coming out. And as always, thanks for watching.